Yes, no story is worth dying for, but I believe that it is our duty as journalists to truly perform our roles, which is to shine a light in dark places.
It's Steve Chao from Al Jazeera. So first question, in your career you've reported from war zones and disasters, so is there one story that stands out and why?
I think there's one region that really stands out for me, and that's Afghanistan. I was there the day that the Taliban surrendered in Kandahar city, and then I've been going in and out of Afghanistan since 2001, and so when you're there so much, your heart really, speaks to the people there. And Afghanistan is such a beautiful place with incredible landscape and beautiful people that are so generous, and it's just heartbreaking to see that they've only endured generations of war.
What's the most difficult thing about being a journalist?
I believe that journalism is a universal right in the sense of the importance of journalism as the fourth estate, holding power to account. But increasingly, I see countries, putting barriers, preventing journalists from entering. I see laws being put in place that are muzzling, journalists. Journalists are being jailed, they're being killed. And that sort of is heartbreaking, and sort of one of the most difficult things nowadays is where we used to have that open space to do reporting. That space is shrinking incredibly.
Have there been times where you, in the line of your work, where you feared for your life? Or maybe even outside work?
Yeah, there are many times. Going back to Afghanistan, I still remember one convoy that we were in coming back from a major mission out with Canadian troops. And, we'd been in firefights, RPG attacks, you name it, and fortunately everyone was okay in terms of the soldiers. And I still remember we had to pass a place called Suicide Alley. So a 1 kilometer stretch that at that time was the most dangerous strip of road in the world. And sure enough, as we were passing, I had my little camera rolling just in case we were under attack. And we were at the end of Suicide Alley. We thought we were cleared. And then I heard the gunner in the armored vehicle I was in yell, "Watch the minivan on the left." And at that moment, the minivan, which was laden with explosives, gunned into the convoy, hit the truck in front of us, and detonated. And I still remember that moment when you felt the impact of an explosion, of a minivan packed with explosives. And I still remember my hands, afterwards, shaking like this, realizing how close we were to really, booking it, if you will. Fortunately, the vehicle in front that was hit, the 2 soldiers fell out in flames, but luckily they survived. Really sadly, there were about 5 other people, civilians on the side, including a young boy that was killed by the shrapnel. And that's a daily occurrence in a lot of places in Afghanistan and elsewhere. And we were just talking earlier about how much more coverage does there need to be in underreported areas. And I think that we as journalists out in the field are always fighting to try to say to the world, pay attention to the tragedies that are happening in a lot of the developing countries, if you will, and don't get tired so fast, public, in terms of ongoing conflicts like Afghanistan, like Syria, like Egypt and elsewhere.
Who is the most interesting person you've interviewed?
I don't think there is one. Perhaps one of the most interesting stories I've ever done went back to when I was a local reporter in Canada when there was a cat stuck up a pole. And that's one of the sort of traditional stories that you never imagined that you as a reporter would do. But we interviewed the cat afterwards after it was rescued by the firefighters, and it was quite a good interview.
What did it say?
Meow, I think.
Oh. Compelling.
Alex Woon would like to know, do you think there's really a story worth dying for?
That's a really good
That's a tough question. All my bosses would often tell me before going anywhere, Steve, there is no story worth dying for. So, definitely do not put yourself in harm's way. I've lost friends, local producers who've been killed. And they're passionate about journalism. And it's sort of sad to see sometimes they lose their lives for it. But I know that in one case, one journalist in southern Afghanistan who died, Jojo, if I was able to talk to him now, he would still say that journalism was worth it. So, yes, no story is worth dying for, but I believe that it is our duty as journalists to truly perform our roles, which is to shine a light in dark places. and sometimes that involves risk.
We have a question from Tamovani. She asks, how do you practice freedom of speech?
I think it's our duty to always push that space. And I think as part of an international media network, Al Jazeera, we have more of a space here in Malaysia to push the envelope, and we do. We often hold power to account here. I still remember our story on migrants and refugees here in Malaysia, and our story resulted in some parliamentary debate as to whether the treatment was right or wrong. I reported for 5 years based out of Beijing, and China often falls to the lower level, if not the one of the lowest levels in terms of freedom of speech. Even though we are under constant surveillance, even though our phones are monitored, we still feel that there is a role for us to be there. And I think we just have to work in the space that we have and within the laws and limitations given to try to be, try to perform our duty, which is to hold power to account.